The wealthy rancher came to collect a debt, but discovered a young widow caring for 5 children. The wind of Virlia 9 was a harsh, cold thing, whipping across the barren plains like invisible whips. The red dust swirled around the narrow path that led to the homestead. Jerk Thorne sat in the cockpit of his land speeder, watching the horizon. The sun was barely rising, casting pale golden light across the distant mountains. He adjusted his hat and exhaled slowly. This was the kind of planet most people avoided, lawless, dangerous, and unforgiving. Yet here he was. Jerk was a wealthy rancher, not the kind of person who spent his life hiding in offices or playing with credits in some city. No, he owned lands across several systems, each with livestock, crops, and machines that fed thousands. His reputation was known for fairness, yes, but also for being relentless when it came to debts. And today he had come to collect one. The homestead he sought was supposed to belong to a man named Darian Halsey, a struggling settler who had borrowed a large sum to expand his farm. Weeks had passed, and the debt remained unpaid. Jerk was told that Darian had disappeared, or perhaps run away. The truth, he suspected, would be simple: abandonment. Settlers on this frontier often vanished when life became too difficult. The speeder rolled over rocks and dry soil, kicking up dust that glowed in the morning light. As he approached the homestead, Jerk noticed the first surprising thing. The place was not abandoned. Smoke rose gently from a stone chimney. The fences, though weathered, were intact. A small herd of goats and a few chickens moved about the yard. The crops in the small field swayed in the wind, golden under the sun. Someone was living here, someone working, someone surviving. Jerk slowed the speeder. He dismounted with a practiced grace, his boots sinking slightly in the soft, dusty ground. He approached the front door, hand resting on the butt of the small blaster he always carried. Yet, he knew better than to make assumptions. He had seen enough of the frontier to know that appearances were often deceiving. The door opened before he could knock. A young woman stood there, her hair tied back in a loose braid. Her hands were calloused, her clothes simple, and her eyes that spoke of determination. Not fear, not desperation, but steady resolve. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice firm but polite. "I'm Jerk Thorne," he said, straightening. "I've come about a debt, Darian Halsey. He borrowed from me and hasn't paid." The woman's expression shifted slightly, something between sadness and caution, but she didn't step back. "Darian isn't here," she said. "He died." Jerk raised an eyebrow. "Died?" "Yes," she said softly. "In a raid last year. I've been raising his children since. I can pay what I owe slowly, but I cannot, not all at once. Life here is hard, and the children—" Her voice trailed off. She gestured behind her. 5 children emerged from the house, small but sturdy, their clothes patched but clean. They stared at the stranger in silence. The oldest, a boy of about 12, had his hand on a wooden staff, not as a weapon but as a support for his small body. The youngest clutched a rag doll, eyes wide and curious. Jerk's gaze swept over them. He felt a tug he didn't expect. Here were 5 lives, fragile yet unbroken, held together by a woman who seemed to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. He cleared his throat, attempting to hide the effect. He wasn't here to judge anyone. He was here to collect a debt. That was it, business, nothing more. "I see," he said carefully. "And you are—" "Alara," she said. "Alara Halsey, Darian's widow." Jerk nodded, though he wasn't sure what that meant for him. The wind picked up suddenly, carrying a sharp chill. A screeching sound echoed from the cliffs above. Jerk's hand instinctively went to his side. He had expected bandits, maybe some wild animals, but what came next surprised him. A creature leapt from the cliffs, a Virlian screecher. Its body was covered in dark, scaly armor, and its eyes glowed red. It landed near the goats with a powerful thud, snapping its jaws. The animals scattered in terror. Alara reacted immediately. She grabbed a long stick and waved it, shouting at the creature. The children ran behind her, frightened but obedient. Jerk, without thinking, drew his blaster and fired. The shot struck the creature, but it only hissed and charged closer. Alara did not move. Instead, she shouted commands, guiding the children to safety behind the stone walls. "Get back! Stay low! Don't be afraid!" Jerk watched her. There was no hesitation, no panic. She moved with precision, understanding the creature's behavior as if she had faced it many times before. He had seen soldiers with far less courage than this woman had, and he had trained men for years in combat and frontier survival. With a final, careful aim, he shot again. This time the screecher fell, rolling onto the ground. The wind howled as it scuttled away, limping but alive. Alara approached him cautiously, breathing heavily. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. "It's not dead, it's injured. You can't just kill what you don't understand." Jerk lowered his blaster. You knew what it was doing." "Yes," she said. "I've been here a long time. I know this land, I know the creatures, and I know how to protect my children." There was a silence. Jerk realized something important. This was not a helpless homestead as he had expected. This was a family that survived because of courage, knowledge, and unity. Not money, not status, not technology. They survived because they were human and resilient. For the first time in a long while, Jerk felt uncertain. His mission, simple and clear when he left his ranch, now seemed trivial in comparison to what stood before him. Collecting a debt felt suddenly cold, meaningless, almost cruel. Alara studied him carefully. "You're not like the others," she said. "The ones who have come before just wanted credits or power or land. You came with a weapon, but I don't think you want to hurt us, do you?" Jerk shook his head slowly. "No, I'm here for business. But I can see now that business is not all there is to life." She nodded slightly, her eyes softening. "Then stay for breakfast. The children are hungry. You can tell me how you plan to collect this debt while we eat." Jerk hesitated. He wasn't a man who took meals with strangers, not like this, not in the middle of the frontier. But something in her voice, something in the warmth of the small home against the harsh world outside, made him agree. Inside, the homestead smelled of fresh bread and roasted roots. The children, shy at first, began to ask questions. Jerk answered, careful to be honest but not boastful. He found himself smiling at their small jokes, their laughter bright against the low hum of the wind outside. Alara watched him quietly, noting the way he softened around the children. "You'll need to stay alert," she said finally. "The frontier isn't kind to people like us, even with your help, but you'll see that survival is more than strength. It's cleverness, heart, and determination." Jerk nodded, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. He had faced storms, bandits, and wild creatures before, but he had never faced this. A family standing together, surviving together, in a world that seemed determined to crush them. For the first time, he realized that wealth, power, and influence might keep a man safe, but they could never teach him what it meant to truly survive. That lesson belonged to the widow and her children and to the frontier itself. The wind outside did not stop, nor did the world grow kinder. But for one moment, inside the small stone house, there was warmth, safety, and a spark of hope. And Jerk Thorne, wealthy rancher, debt collector, and stranger, realized that his life, and perhaps his understanding of humanity, was about to change forever. The morning on Virlia 9 dawned pale and brittle, the wind slicing across the homestead with sharp edges of cold air. The sun barely rose above the jagged horizon, and the red soil sparkled faintly with frost. Inside the small stone house, the smell of freshly baked bread mixed with roasted root vegetables. Jerk Thorne, wealthy rancher and reluctant visitor, was sitting at the wooden table with Alara and her 5 children. For the first time since he arrived, Jerk felt something unfamiliar. He was not in control. On his ranches, every decision had consequences he could manage. Every problem had a solution backed by manpower, machinery, or credits. But here, at the edge of the galaxy, surrounded by a widow and her children, he was just a guest, and that was unsettling. Alara noticed his discomfort. She poured him a cup of warm tea and placed it before him, her hand steady, her gaze unwavering. "Drink," she said softly. "You'll need your strength." Jerk nodded, lifting the cup. The warmth of the tea was comforting, though it could not wash away the questions forming in his mind. Why was he here? What was he supposed to do about the debt? And why, against all his instincts, did he feel a strange respect for this woman who had nothing but determination? The children, shy but curious, began to speak. The eldest boy, Taran, asked questions about Jerk's life, about the ships he owned and the planets he had seen. Jerk answered carefully, keeping his words simple but honest. The girl next to him, Lyra, was quieter, observing his hands and the way he carried himself. A small boy, Finn, tugged at the hem of Jerk's coat, and another child, Myra, peeked from behind her mother, too timid to ask but too curious to stay hidden. "You have many worlds," Alara said finally, her eyes studying Jerk. "Many resources, and yet you travel alone." "I travel where I must," Jerk said simply. "And sometimes alone is better, easier." Alara shook her head slightly, a faint smile touching her lips. "Alone is safer." "Perhaps, but life isn't about safety. It's about survival, and survival is about more than avoiding danger. It's about protecting those who depend on you." Jerk frowned. He had heard this kind of philosophy before, from old ranch hands, from elders in distant systems. But hearing it here, in this quiet homestead, made it resonate differently. He thought of the children and the way Alara moved among them, guiding them with patience and authority. He realized that her words were not theory, they were practice. After breakfast, the wind had softened slightly, though the chill remained. Jerk followed Alara outside to inspect the homestead. She led him to the fields, the fences, and the small water pumps she had built from spare parts scavenged from old machinery. Every corner of the property bore her careful work, and every detail spoke of efficiency, intelligence, and ingenuity. "You can see why the debt is difficult to pay," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Every credit I might send your way is already used to feed these children, to keep them warm, to repair what the frontier destroys daily. If I fail in these things, I fail them. That is a debt I cannot ignore." Jerk nodded slowly. He could see it now, the logic, the dedication. A simple ledger of credits could not measure the value of human effort, of care, of sacrifice. Yet his duty, his orders, still weighed heavily. "I understand," he said. "But the debt, it cannot simply be ignored. It is legal, binding." Alara's eyes met his, steady and unyielding. "So is life," she said quietly. "And life cannot be measured in credits either." Her words struck Jerk in a way he did not expect. On his ranches, people often measured worth by what they owned or produced. Here, worth was measured by courage, by resilience, by love. The frontier demanded more than wealth, it demanded spirit. The conversation was interrupted by a sudden rustling in the fields. Jerk's hand went to his blaster, instinctively. Alara raised a hand, signaling him to wait. From the edge of the homestead, a small herd of Virelian grazers appeared. They were peaceful creatures, almost like giant, horned deer with mottled brown and gray hides. But they were skittish, easily startled, and their presence meant one thing. The wildlife of the planet was always close, always watching, always testing the homestead. Alara moved toward the animals slowly, her hands outstretched. "Easy," she whispered. The children watched from behind the fence, wide-eyed. "We live with them, not against them. They teach us patience. They teach us attention. We cannot fight the world every day or we will lose." Jerk watched her. He had fought bandits, wild creatures, and harsh elements, but he had never considered that survival could involve harmony with the natural world. It was human, in a way that struck him deeply. After tending to the grazers, Alara led Jerk to the back of the property, where a small garden grew despite the poor soil. Roots, leafy greens, and a few hardy fruits were planted in neat rows. "Food is life," she said, "and every meal is earned." The children learn responsibility, the land teaches patience, and together we thrive. Jerk frowned, but he couldn't deny the logic. On his wealthier worlds, technology solved every problem. Machines grew crops, synthesized food, and purified water. But here, on the frontier, every success came from effort, thought, and heart. Every failure had a lesson. They worked together for the rest of the morning. Jerk helped repair a broken fence, while Ilara guided the children in collecting firewood. Taran, the eldest, watched Jerk closely, asking questions about the machines on his ranch. Finn and Myra helped lift small logs, learning coordination and strength. Even Lyra, who had been shy at first, began to assist in simple but careful ways. As they worked, Jerk noticed how different his life had been. On his ranches, work was ordered, planned, and efficient, but sterile. Here, every action carried meaning. Every success was shared. Every mistake was a lesson, not a failure. The thought unsettled him but also intrigued him. By afternoon, the sun had climbed higher, though the wind had grown stronger again. Clouds of dust swirled across the plain, and the first signs of an approaching storm appeared. Jerk knew that a storm on Virlia 9 was no small matter. It could destroy crops, ruin fences, and put lives at risk. Yet Ilara moved calmly, instructing the children to secure their tools, gather water, and reinforce the structures. "You can't control the world," she said simply. "You can only prepare, adapt, and protect those you care about. That is the measure of a person." Jerk felt a strange mix of respect and humility. This woman, with nothing but determination and a love for her family, managed what he had never considered, life itself. And she did it with such grace that he realized how little he had truly understood about human resilience. The storm hit that evening, fierce and unrelenting. Winds tore across the plains, shaking the homestead and scattering dust like fine sand. Jerk stood with Ilara, securing the final boards on the fences. The children huddled inside, protected by their mother's foresight and the walls she had built. As lightning flashed across the sky, Jerk saw the strength of human spirit. Not wealth, not power, not technology, just determination, care, and courage. The homestead endured not because of him, not because of his blaster, but because of the widow who refused to yield. When the storm finally passed, the sky was clear, the ground wet and dark. Jerk looked at Ilara, at the children, at the land they had protected. He realized that this was a frontier unlike any he had known, a place where human strength was measured not in credits or machines, but in courage, wisdom, and love. "Your family, your home," he said quietly. "It's remarkable. I came here to collect a debt, but I see now it is something more, something important." Ilara's eyes softened. "Debt is just numbers. Life is much bigger. You can choose to see it that way, or you can cling to numbers and miss the lesson." Jerk nodded slowly, understanding for the first time that his arrival here had been more than a business transaction. It had been a lesson in humanity, resilience, and the value of connection. And though he had come to enforce law and ledger, he now saw that survival, courage, and love were the forces that truly mattered. The children emerged from the house, smiling despite the wind and dust. They were tired, but unharmed. They ran to the fields, laughing as the storm's last drops fell. Jerk watched, realizing that the frontier could destroy or build, depending on who faced it, and that this family had chosen to build. For the first time, he questioned his own path. Wealth, power, control, they were all tools. But here, he had seen what truly mattered: human courage, unity, and the will to protect and nurture life against impossible odds. Jerk Thorne, wealthy rancher, debt collector, and traveler across the stars, realized that his journey had changed. The debt he had come to collect seemed trivial compared to the lesson he had learned. Life, in its purest form, was worth more than any credit, any contract, or any promise of profit. And perhaps, he thought, the frontier was teaching him what it truly meant to be human. The morning light on Virlia 9 was cold but clear, stretching across the plains like a pale blanket. The homestead, still recovering from the previous day's storm, stood resilient. Jerk Thorne watched from the edge of the field, leaning on a repaired fence post. He had spent the night in the small guest room, listening to the wind and the quiet murmurs of the children in the next room. Sleep had been uneasy. His mind wandered to debts, ledgers, and contracts. But beneath all of that, a new concern stirred, one that was not on any financial sheet. Alara emerged from the house, carrying a basket of freshly baked bread. She looked calm, though her eyes betrayed constant awareness. "We need to prepare," she said simply. Jerk raised an eyebrow. "Prepare? For what?" Alara did not answer immediately. She scanned the horizon, eyes sharp, noticing subtle changes in the wind, the movement of distant dust clouds, and the occasional flare of sunlight reflecting off rocks. "Something is coming," she said finally. "I can feel it. It is not the storm, it is something else." Raiders, perhaps, or worse. Jerk frowned. Raiders were not uncommon on Virlia 9. The frontier was full of desperate people, willing to take from others to survive. But this homestead, small and seemingly vulnerable, would be a tempting target. He realized that the lesson from the storm had only partially prepared him. The wind could not hurt as much as other humans, or other creatures with ill intent could. The children watched from the steps of the house, curiosity mixing with caution. Taran, the eldest, stepped forward. "Do we fight, Mother?" he asked, voice serious. Alara knelt to his level, placing her hands on his shoulders. "We defend," she said, "but we fight wisely, not recklessly. Understanding is more powerful than strength alone." Jerk felt a spark of respect for her words. On his ranches, strength often won battles. But here, wisdom and preparation were just as valuable. He realized that he had come to a place where survival was not simply about wealth or power. It was about knowledge, courage, and unity. They spent the morning preparing the homestead. Jerk showed Alara how to reinforce the fence with metal rods he carried from his speeder. He demonstrated ways to use the environment as defense, shifting rocks, creating barriers, and using high ground to observe approaching threats. The children watched and assisted, learning quickly. Each instruction was simple, yet it carried a lesson. Strategy and teamwork could make the smallest defenders formidable. By afternoon, the wind had shifted. Small dust clouds rose in the distance, moving unnaturally fast across the plains. Jerk squinted, feeling a familiar tension in his chest. "Raiders," he said quietly. Alara nodded. "I thought so. They have heard rumors of our homestead, or perhaps they have been watching for a while. Either way, we cannot avoid them." The children, though young, absorbed every word. Taran helped gather stones for throwing. Lyra prepared small defensive tools. Finn and Myra carried water and supplies. Alara supervised, guiding them with a calm authority that made fear irrelevant. Jerk realized that this was survival in its purest form: preparation, courage, and unity. As the dust clouds approached, figures became visible on the horizon. Rough, armored humans riding strange vehicles designed for speed and destruction. Their leader waved a flag signaling intent. These were not ordinary settlers. They were raiders, armed and dangerous, with no care for life except their own profit. Alara approached Jerk quietly. "We must be ready," she said. "But remember, we fight to protect, not to harm beyond necessity. We are guardians, not conquerors." Jerk nodded. This was different from any battle he had faced. On his ranches, disputes were often settled with force or negotiation backed by wealth. Here, the stakes were survival and life itself. And here, he understood that human courage could equal or even surpass wealth and firepower. The raiders advanced cautiously, expecting easy prey. But the homestead was not defenseless. Jerk had set traps, simple yet effective. He had shown the children how to position themselves to appear larger, louder, and more dangerous. Alara had reinforced the main gate and hidden the children in safe spots. Every step, Every decision was a lesson in human ingenuity. When the raiders reached the outer perimeter, the first trap activated, a pit hidden beneath loose soil, catching a small vehicle off guard and sending its riders tumbling. Shouts echoed across the plains. The raiders regrouped, surprised at the level of preparedness. Jerk stepped forward, standing beside Alara. "They underestimate us," he said. "They think we are weak, but they do not know what humans can do when they fight for life and family." Alara's eyes met his. "Then show them." The battle began, though it was more of a strategic defense than a reckless attack. The children helped where they could, throwing small stones, sounding alarms, and moving supplies. Taryn directed the youngest, giving them roles suited to their abilities. Even the smallest, Myra, carried water to cool engines or assist the injured. Each action, no matter how small, contributed to the whole. The raiders were aggressive but unprepared for coordination and intelligence. Jerk and Alara moved like a single unit, anticipating moves, redirecting attacks, and keeping the children safe. Each step, each strategy demonstrated that human determination and ingenuity could turn the tide against a superior force. Hours passed. Dust filled the air, obscuring vision, but the homestead remained intact. The raiders, frustrated and battered by their own underestimation, finally began to retreat. Their leader cursed, shaking his fist, realizing that brute force alone could not conquer life lived with courage, care, and wisdom. When the dust settled, Jerk looked around. The homestead had minor damage, but it had survived. The children emerged, faces streaked with dust and sweat but smiling. They had learned something invaluable. Courage was not just about strength, it was about heart, strategy, and unity. Alara placed her hand on Jerk's shoulder. "You see now," she said quietly, "that life cannot be measured in credits or contracts. It is measured by what we protect, what we endure, and what we teach those who follow." Jerk nodded, understanding deeper than ever before. He had come to collect a debt, expecting to exert power over a small, weak homestead. Instead, he had witnessed human spirit at its finest. This family, simple yet extraordinary, had survived storms, danger, and fear because they trusted one another and valued life above all else. The children ran to play in the aftermath, their laughter ringing across the fields. Jerk watched, realizing that he had never felt such admiration before. The frontier had a harsh way of teaching lessons, and he had learned one that no amount of wealth could purchase. Even as the sun set, casting long shadows across the plains, Jerk felt a sense of purpose growing inside him. He was not just a collector of debts. He could be a protector, a teacher, a guide. And perhaps in this remote corner of the galaxy, he had found something even more valuable than credits or lands: a family, courage, and the human spirit itself. Alara stood beside him, looking toward the horizon. "Tomorrow," she said, "we will need to reinforce the defenses further. They may return, and next time they may come stronger, but we will be ready together." Jerk smiled faintly. "Together," he echoed. For the first time in his life, he felt that wealth and power were secondary to human connection, bravery, and resilience. The frontier had taught him more than any contract, any machine, or any planet ever could. That night, as the stars emerged in a clear sky, Jerk sat outside the homestead, listening to the soft breathing of the children inside and the quiet murmur of Alara moving about. He realized that he had come to Virlia 9 expecting a simple business task. Instead, he had discovered life's true wealth: the courage to endure, the wisdom to prepare, and the love to protect what mattered most. And deep down, he knew that the story of this homestead was just beginning. Raiders could return. Storms could strike. The frontier was relentless. But no force, no matter how powerful, could crush the human spirit when hearts, minds, and hands worked together. For Jerk, that realization was worth more than all the credits he had ever collected. Here, on a windswept world at the edge of the galaxy, He had learned the greatest lesson of all. Humans, when united by purpose and courage, could survive anything. The wind on Virelia 9 had grown colder, sharper, as if warning the homestead of what was coming. Jerk Thorne stood on the small rise overlooking the property, watching distant dust clouds that moved unnaturally fast across the plains. His hand rested on the reinforced fence, eyes scanning for the first sign of movement. He had come expecting a simple collection of a debt, then a lesson in courage. But now the threat was real, immediate, and relentless. Alara appeared at his side, calm but alert. Her eyes were steady, scanning the horizon just as he was. "They are close," she said softly. "And this time they will not hesitate. They will not leave without taking what they want." Jerk nodded. He had prepared for this, but the reality of facing a fully armed raider band was different. This was no scouting group. This was a force that expected dominance, that relied on fear and strength. Yet he was no longer alone. He was part of a family, a team, a homestead that had learned to endure. Inside the house, the children prepared as best they could. Taryn organized supplies, placing rocks, tools, and whatever could serve as simple defense in strategic spots. Lyra and Finn checked water sources and barricaded entrances. Myra carried small baskets of food to the safe room, ready to support anyone who might need it. Every child had a role, and every role mattered. Alara moved among them, giving instructions without panic, her calm authority anchoring the household. "Remember what we practiced," she said. "Stay hidden if you must. Observe, act, protect. Courage is knowing when to fight and when to survive." Jerk felt a swell of respect. He had faced many dangers in his life, storms, wild creatures, and even aggressive settlers, but he had never seen courage so calmly controlled, so precisely directed. This was the human spirit at its finest, deliberate, fearless, and bound by purpose. The raiders appeared over the horizon, jagged silhouettes against the dull light. Their vehicles were larger than before, armored and equipped with weapons designed for destruction. They shouted, waving crude flags, their intentions clear: take or destroy. Jerk and Alara moved to the perimeter, signaling the children to remain hidden. The raiders advanced cautiously, expecting an easy attack, but the homestead was ready. Traps lined the path, pits disguised with dust and rocks, tripwires connected to alarms, and hidden barriers meant to slow or confuse the enemy. The first vehicle triggered a pit, tipping violently and sending its occupants tumbling. Shouts of surprise echoed across the plains. The raiders were not prepared for the cunning defense of a small homestead. Jerk stepped forward, taking aim at anyone who threatened the fences. Alara moved alongside him, not firing but guiding him and the children. "Conserve your energy," she instructed. "Make each action count. They will test us. We must respond smartly, not recklessly." The raiders regrouped and advanced again. This time they came in smaller units, attempting to flank the homestead from multiple sides. Jerk's mind raced, calculating angles, distances, and the best ways to funnel them into traps. Alara's eyes scanned constantly, spotting weaknesses in their formation, signaling directions to the children hidden behind rocks and walls. Taryn took the lead with the younger children, positioning them behind small barricades, ready to drop rocks or make noise to mislead the raiders. Jerk noticed the precision and coordination. The children were not afraid, they were acting, guided by experience, courage, and careful instruction. The first skirmish began in earnest. A raider charged at the reinforced fence, expecting little resistance. He was met with a combination of traps and strategic fire from Jerk's blaster. The vehicle toppled, the raider thrown off balance. Shouts of anger and surprise rang across the plains. Alara moved to the side, guiding the children to distract the other attackers. Lyra lifted a small mirror, reflecting sunlight into the eyes of approaching raiders, confusing them. Finn and Myra threw dirt and rocks to trigger alarms and noise traps. Each action, though simple, amplified the effect of the larger defense. Jerk felt a surge of admiration. This was not merely a family defending their home. It was a demonstration of human ingenuity, determination, and unity. The raiders were strong and well-armed, but they lacked coordination and purpose beyond greed. In contrast, the homestead was small, but every individual knew their role, acted with courage, and thought ahead. Hours passed in a tense blur. Dust rose, machines clattered, and the screams of frustrated raiders mixed with the calm commands of Alara and the shouts of Jerk. The homestead, though battered, held strong. Every trap, every barricade, and every calculated action had worked. One raider, growing impatient, attempted to breach the main gate. Jerk anticipated the move, signaling Alara. Together, they lured him into a narrow channel where he was met by another pit trap. The raider tumbled, snarling in frustration as Jerk's blaster ensured he could not continue the attack. The leader of the raiders, a tall figure in battered armor, cursed loudly. "They are clever," he shouted. "This is impossible. Fall back, regroup." But retreat was not simple. Jerk had anticipated the timing, the angle, and the frustration of the attackers. Hidden alarms, minor obstacles, and the unpredictable actions of the children created chaos. The raiders struggled to maintain formation, each step met with unexpected resistance. Alara turned to Jerk, a faint smile crossing her face despite the dust and sweat. "Do you see now?" she asked. "This is what humans can do. Not because we are the strongest, but because we are clever, determined, and united." Jerk nodded, realizing fully the truth of her words. He had traveled across systems, commanding wealth, technology, and influence. But here, a small family had outsmarted a superior force through courage, preparation, and teamwork. The lesson was clear. Human ingenuity, when combined with purpose and unity, could overcome even the greatest threats. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, the raiders, battered and exhausted, finally began to retreat. Their vehicles kicked up dust as they fled, leaving behind what they had underestimated. A small homestead, still standing, defended by a widow, 5 children, and a wealthy rancher who had learned the true measure of courage. The children emerged from hiding, their faces streaked with dirt but shining with pride. Taran helped his younger siblings down from behind rocks and barricades. Myra ran to her mother, hugging her tightly, while Finn laughed, exhilarated by the experience. Lyra's eyes shone with newfound confidence, having contributed meaningfully to the defense. Jerk watched, feeling something he had not felt in a long time. Awe, not awe at wealth or power, but at human spirit. The courage, ingenuity, and unity of this small family had achieved what brute force could not. And in that moment, he understood something profound. Wealth, machines, and weapons were tools, but determination, intelligence, and heart were what truly mattered. Alara approached him, dusting off her hands. "They will likely return," she said quietly. "But now they know we are not easy prey. They will think twice." Jerk nodded. "And if they do, then we will be ready," she replied, "because we have learned, adapted, and grown stronger. And because we are together." The sun set, casting long shadows across the plains. The homestead, though marked by the battle, stood resilient. Jerk looked at the children, laughing and talking as they inspected the traps and repaired minor damage. He saw their courage, their intelligence, and their ability to act as a team. Each child had learned something invaluable. Life demanded preparation, action, and unity. Jerk realized that he had come to Virlia 9 expecting a simple task: collect a debt. Instead, he had witnessed an extraordinary display of human spirit. The widow and her children had survived storms, wild creatures, and raiders because they had something that money could not buy: courage, ingenuity, and the will to protect one another. As night fell, the stars appeared, cold and distant, yet beautiful. Jerk sat outside the homestead, listening to the soft murmurs of the children inside. the calm movements of Alara, and the quiet wind whispering across the plains. He understood now that life's greatest value was not credits or land, but the courage to endure, the wisdom to plan, and the love to protect those who depended on you. For Jerk Thorne, the wealthy rancher who had come to collect a debt, the frontier had taught a lesson he would never forget. Humans, when united by purpose, courage, and intelligence, could survive anything, even when faced with overwhelming odds. And in the quiet aftermath of the raid, as the children laughed and the homestead stood strong, he realized something else. He was no longer merely an observer. He had become a part of this story, a part of this family, and a witness to the extraordinary resilience of humanity. Virelia 9 was harsh. Its storms were fierce. Its wildlife was dangerous. Its raiders were ruthless. But here, at the edge of the galaxy, a small homestead had proven that human courage, ingenuity, and unity could overcome any threat. Jerk knew that tomorrow they would continue to rebuild, reinforce, and prepare. But for tonight, they would rest together, proud of what they had achieved. And in that moment, he understood a truth he could not have learned anywhere else. Humanity was strongest when hearts, minds, and hands worked together, when courage met wisdom, and when determination outweighed fear. The frontier was relentless, but so were they. The morning sun rose over Virelia 9, soft and golden, painting the plains with warmth after the previous day's fierce raid. The wind, though still strong, carried a gentler promise today. The homestead stood tall, showing minor scars from the battle but otherwise intact. Jerk Thorne, wealthy rancher and recent visitor, stood near the outer fence, surveying the property. He had expected a simple collection of debt, yet here he was, deeply involved in a family's life, witnessing something far more valuable than credits or contracts. Alara moved beside him, carrying a small basket of fresh bread. Her eyes were bright, filled with quiet determination, and her posture reflected both pride and vigilance. "They won't return for a while," she said calmly, "but when they do, we will be stronger." Jerk nodded, thinking about the events of the last days. Storms, wild creatures, and raiders. He had seen the full power of the frontier. Yet he had also witnessed courage, resourcefulness, and love. This family had survived because they understood life in a way that wealth and power could never teach. The children emerged from the house, still tired but smiling. Taryn, the eldest, inspected the fences and traps, offering suggestions for improvements. Lyra helped Finn and Myra repair minor damages to the outbuildings. Even the smallest tasks were carried out with care and purpose. Each child had learned something invaluable: bravery, teamwork, and the understanding that every action could make a difference. Jerk realized that this was true human resilience. Wealth could buy protection, but it could not teach resourcefulness. Technology could provide comfort, but it could not instill courage. Only experience, determination, and unity could do that, and this family embodied all three. Alara motioned for Jerk to follow her inside. "We should discuss what comes next," she said. They sat at the wooden table, the children quietly occupied with chores and small repairs. Jerk hesitated at first, unsure how to approach the subject of the debt after everything that had happened. "I came here for a debt," he said slowly, choosing his words. "I expected an easy task. I expected to enforce contracts and collect what was owed, but I see now that the value of life is far greater than credits or obligations." Alara listened quietly, her hands folded in front of her. And, Jerk continued, "I will forgive the debt." He paused, watching her carefully. "Not because it is easy, but because I see the effort, courage, and wisdom that you and your children put into surviving here. You have earned something far more valuable than money. You have earned respect." Alara's eyes softened, a faint smile touching her lips. "You don't know how much that means," she said quietly. "Every credit I could have sent you would have been taken by survival. But respect is something that endures." Jerk felt a strange warmth in his chest. For years, he had measured success by numbers, by ownership, by the growth of his lands and the wealth of his ranches. But here, on this frontier world, he had discovered a different kind of wealth: courage, unity, and human spirit. The children gathered around, curious despite their fatigue. "Does that mean we don't owe him anything?" Taryn asked. Alara nodded. "It means that we have learned more than any ledger could teach us, and sometimes life's lessons are worth more than debts." Lyra looked at Jerk, her eyes wide. "Will you stay?" she asked quietly. Jerk considered the question. He had traveled countless worlds, commanded resources, and dealt with countless challenges. Yet nothing had felt as meaningful as being here, part of this small family, witnessing the strength and courage of humans facing impossible odds. "I will stay," he said finally. "Not as a master, not as a collector, but as someone who wants to help. Together, we can make this homestead stronger, safer, and even more resilient." Alara's smile widened slightly. "Then we will teach you what we know," she said, "and you will teach us what you know. We are stronger together." The next days were filled with rebuilding, reinforcement, and learning. Jerk taught the children more sophisticated techniques for observation, defense, and preparation. He showed them how to identify threats from a distance, how to reinforce structures efficiently, and how to improvise tools from the limited resources of the frontier. The children absorbed every lesson with enthusiasm, their confidence growing with each passing day. Alara shared her knowledge as well. She taught Jerk and the children about local wildlife, how to read weather patterns, and how to survive in a land that offered no mercy. Every lesson was practical, rooted in experience and careful observation. Jerk began to see that these skills were far more valuable than any wealth he could acquire. One afternoon, as the wind swept across the plains, Jerk and Taryn worked on a water system to capture and store rainwater. Lyra, Finn, and Myra assisted, learning how to channel small streams, reinforce barriers, and conserve resources. Alara moved among them, guiding, correcting, and encouraging. Jerk observed the children's transformation. Fear had been replaced by confidence. Hesitation had given way to deliberate action. And through it all, they had learned that courage was not about fighting recklessly, but about thinking, preparing, and protecting others. That evening, they gathered around a small fire outside the homestead. The stars above Virlia 9 shone brightly, untainted by city lights or artificial glow. Jerk felt a sense of peace he had never experienced on his sprawling ranches. Here, under the vast sky, surrounded by humans who had proven their worth in ways money could not measure, he felt part of something extraordinary. Alara spoke softly. "Tomorrow, we will expand the fields. We will plant more crops, gather more water, and prepare for the next storm. The frontier never rests, and neither can we. But we have learned, we are ready." Jerk nodded, looking at the children. "We are ready," he echoed, "because we understand what it takes to survive. Because we know courage, unity, and intelligence can overcome even the greatest challenges. And because we protect those who matter most." The days that followed were full of hard work and small triumphs. The homestead grew stronger, fortified against raiders, storms, and wildlife. The children thrived, their confidence and skills developing with each task. Taryn became a natural leader, guiding the younger children and assisting in complex repairs. Lyra's sharp eyes caught details others missed. Finn and Myra contributed with energy and determination, learning the value of teamwork and perseverance. Jerk worked alongside them, no longer the outsider, no longer a simple collector of debts. He had become part of this family, contributing his knowledge, skills, and resources. And in return, he learned lessons that no wealth could provide: the value of courage, the strength of unity, and the enduring power of human spirit. Weeks passed, and the homestead became a small beacon of life on the harsh frontier. Other settlers, curious about the resilient family, came to learn and share resources. Jerk's presence gave them confidence. Alara's leadership inspired them. The children, once small and uncertain, became examples of what humans could achieve when guided by courage, knowledge, and purpose. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, Jerk stood with Alara on the small rise overlooking the homestead. The children played nearby, laughing and helping with repairs. The homestead was alive with activity, safe and thriving. "You have taught me more than I could have imagined," Jerk said quietly. "Not about money, not about land, not about power, but about life, about courage, about what it means to protect and endure. I came here to collect a debt, and instead, I have gained understanding, respect, and family." Alara smiled. "That is what the frontier teaches," she said. "Not all lessons are easy, and not all victories are measured in numbers. Some victories are measured in lives protected, hearts strengthened, and hope preserved." Jerk looked at the horizon, the endless plain stretching far beyond the eye could see. He felt a quiet resolve settle within him. The frontier would always be dangerous. Storms, wildlife, and raiders would continue to test them, but they were ready. Together, they had proven that human courage, intelligence, and unity could overcome any challenge. The children ran to them, dragging small tools and laughing. Taran pointed to the repaired fences. "We did it, father," he exclaimed, using Jerk's name affectionately. Jerk smiled, ruffling Taran's hair. "Yes," he said, "we did it together." Lyra handed him a small basket of fresh vegetables. "For dinner," she said proudly. "Thank you," Jerk replied. "You all have done something extraordinary here. You have built more than a home. You have built courage, strength, and hope." Myra and Finn joined the group, and Alara put her arm around Jerk. "This is only the beginning," she said. "Life will continue to test us, but together we are unstoppable." Jerk nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He had come to Virely expecting to collect a debt, but he had found something far greater: the enduring strength of human spirit, the value of unity, and the true meaning of family. The frontier had tested them, and they had prevailed. As the sun disappeared behind the distant cliffs, the homestead glowed with the warm light of fires, laughter, and life. The children slept safely, the land was secured, and the family stood strong. Jerk understood now that wealth could build comfort, but courage, determination, and love built legacy. And on Virely, a small, resilient homestead thrived, a testament to the power of humans, their courage, and the unyielding spirit that could survive and prosper even in the harshest corners of the galaxy. The frontier was relentless, but so were they. Jerk Thorne, wealthy rancher, debt collector, and now part of something greater, smiled as he looked at the horizon. Life had given him a lesson no contract could ever teach. Humans, when united by heart, mind, and courage, could overcome anything. And together they would thrive. The story of the widow, her children, and the rancher was only beginning. But one thing was certain: the human spirit, tested and proven on the edge of the galaxy, was stronger than any storm, any raider, or any frontier world.